Robert Wright is going to be on green-black Delirium. He's currently 3-0. Kevin Jones, Bant Company, he's currently 3-0. Let's go ahead and jump in.
So this will be pretty interesting. A lot of these decks are playing at a similar pace. I don't think Kevin's going to be significantly faster. I don't think Robert's going to be significantly faster either. But despite that, I still think Robert is going to be looking to play a little bit more of a controlling role. Kevin's deck does have access to a lot of card advantage, though, so it's going to be hard for Robert to control everything that Kevin does. Probably Robert's best path to victory is to land a Liliana, control the board while he ticks it up, and then use its emblem to kind of win.
All right, well, the players are going to be playing at a blisteringly fast pace here. Robert has a Grim Flare on the battlefield, and Kevin has a Lambholt Pacifist. Robert's going to use Liliana to make that Pacifist into a 1-2 and attack in with the Grim Flare. Kevin's not going to block, so Robert's going to get in 2 points of damage and a trigger off of his Grim Flare. So he gets to look at the top 3 cards of his library and then decide to put any number of them back on top or into his graveyard. So let's see what he decides to do here. I know there was a lot of times when I was playing with Grim Flare where I would just bin all 3 cards if I didn't like them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's certainly nice to have that option.
Looks like he does just put an Evolving Wilds into his graveyard, the other 2 back on top, and pass the turn back to Kevin Jones.
And what Robert might want to do in this situation is simply put removal spells on top of his library. If he can just keep attacking with Grim Flare and taking up Liliana and just killing everything that Kevin plays, that's going to put Robert in a great situation. We'll have to see if Kevin can mount a proper defense.
Well, Kevin is just going to play a Nissa Vastwood Seer. He's going to go find a basic forest. Then he's going to use an Evolving Wilds for his turn and go get a Waste and pass the turn back to Robert.
And the Waste is definitely going to let the cat out of the bag. It's going to be, that's got to be sending alarm bells off for Robert, thinking, why would a Waste be there? And really the only answer is Eldrazi Displacer.
All right, so Robert is going to be able to use Deadweight to take care of Nissa. A Liliana +1 and a Deadweight is going to take care of the Lambholt Pacifist. Robert's going to attack for 2, knocking Kevin down to 16, get another activation on this Grim Flare. There's a land and an enchantment in the graveyard. Let's see what he decides to do with the top. So he's going to put the Liliana in the graveyard, which is going to give him land, enchantment, and Planeswalker. So he's 1 card away from turning on Delirium. He just puts another forest and passes the turn back. So if he can play something from his hand next turn to interact with Kevin, he can supersize that Grim Flare into a 4/4.
Yeah, notably he doesn't have a 4th land. It was good tempo for him, playing 2 cards on that turn that were able to kill both of Kevin's plays. But now that Kevin has access to 5 mana, we will see him in 2 spell a turn category or territory, whether it's with Collected Company or some other way.
All right, well, Kevin's just going to pass with 5 mana up, and Robert's going to send in with the Grim Flare. That's going to get in for 2, knock Kevin down to 14, and Robert's going to get another trigger.
And Kevin could try to fire off a Collected Company and potentially block this Grim Flare, but it would leave his creatures open to cards like Ruinous Path, the Liliana Uptick. So I kind of like that Kevin is just saying, I just want to make sure that my creatures live, and I'm going to wait until end of turn to fire this off.
All right, so Robert's going to put a Traverse into his graveyard. It's going to turn on Delirium and pass the turn back to Kevin after playing another tapped land. Kevin's going to fire off a Collected Company on Robert's end step. Let's see what he can find. Just a Sylvan Advocate.
Not a good company.
And Robert has a Murder to take care of it.
Very unfortunate for Kevin. If that Sylvan Advocate had lived, he would have been able to kill this Liliana with the Lumbering Falls that he has in play, which would be quite good. As it stands now, it's going to be a little tough. He's got to be worried about that thing ticking up.
Yeah, it looks like Kevin might not have a 6th land. So we're going to see a Jace.
Also to note, I was going to say I thought maybe he only had 1 blue mana, but he does have mana available for Spell Queller.
All right, so Robert's just going to play his 5th land. I think we're going to see that Ruinous Path here on Jace. No, it's just going to be a Den Protector.
Well, what's nice about this is Robert now can play this Den Protector and tick up the Liliana, and with no attacks, he's pretty much guaranteed to
Make an emblem.
Make an emblem, yeah. And this is, Den Protector, face down Den Protector is certainly one of the things that you want to Spell Queller, because if they kill your Spell Queller, a Den Protector face up isn't actually that great. So.
All right, so Robert's going to get in for 4 with that Grim Flare, going to knock Kevin down to 10. He also gets to use this ability again. He's going to put a Grim Flare into his graveyard and a Transgress, and then leave what looked like a Grasp of Darkness on top of his deck. He's going to plus the Liliana on the Jace. And Kevin's just going to flash that Queller in on Robert's end step as a way to pressure that Liliana and stop it from being able to ultimate. It's also important to note here that he can flip his Jace and be able to replay that Collected Company if he wants.
Yeah, he definitely needs to get in some damage on that Liliana, 100%. It's nice that he doesn't have to worry about his Spell Queller dying, although I still would have liked to have seen it tag that Den Protector, but it would mean that Kevin would have to activate his Lumbering Falls in order to get damage in on the Liliana, basically using all of his mana for the turn.
All right, well, that Jace is going to transform into a Jace Telepath Unbound.
Kevin also has to worry not only about this Liliana, but also just dying. I mean, he's only at 10. I believe that Grim Flare is up to a 4/4. The Den Protector.
Yeah, a flip Den Protector becomes pretty difficult for these Band Company decks to block.
Yeah, especially if you can either get a +1/+1 counter it, or use Liliana in a way so that their creatures are smaller and just can't block it. So the evasive part of Den Protector is very relevant text. If Kevin has an Eldrazi Displacer, he could flicker that Den Protector, which would be pretty nice.
Being able to displace or flickering that Spell Queller is pretty nice too.
Yeah.
All right, so Jace is going to flashback Collected Company. One of the few spells in the deck that you can actually flashback with the back half of Jace, but it's still good enough. Let's see if we can find more than one creature. It looks like we do. We get 2 Duskwatch Recruiters.
Very nice. And I don't believe Robert has access to Languish in the main. Granted, that's knowledge that Kevin, probably doesn't have. But this is a great board state for Kevin. He's probably going to lose his Jace, but that's not the worst thing in the world.
And so Robert's going to flip up a Den Protector on Kevin's end step. Looks like he's going to get back a Traverse the Ulvenwald.
Man, if Kevin could have had a Dromoka's Command that turn, it would have been so good for him.
Yeah. So let's see how Robert decides to play this turn. So it looks like he's sending the Den Protector at Jace and the Grim Flare at Kevin. Jace is going to die. Kevin's going to take 4 and fall down to 6.
And I think part of the reason that Kevin doesn't want to trade here is he wants to keep enough creatures on the board so that he can potentially attack and kill that Liliana.
Yeah. So it looks like Robert puts a Grasp and a Liliana into his graveyard. So we're going to see a Ruinous Path on the Spell Queller. Liliana is going to plus on one of the Duskwatch Recruiters and then pass the turn back. And he did leave a land on top of his library so that next turn he can traverse for an Ishkana and play it all in the same turn.
Yeah, and that'll certainly do a lot of work to protect this Liliana. Kevin can attack and kill the Liliana, but that would require activating his Lumbering Falls, which would
well, he still would only be able to do 5.
Oh, that's right, yeah, because one of them has been targeted by the Liliana's +1. So this is a pretty dire scenario for Kevin.
He's also at 6, so that Den Protector can finish this game fairly quickly.
Yeah.
All right, so Kevin is going to attack Liliana with a Duskwatch Recruiter. Robert has a Grasp of Darkness, just going to take care of it.
Pretty rough spot for Kevin. On Robert's turn 4, he didn't have a 4th land, but he had 2 Deadweights and was able to cash both of them in for full bodies. I think that was one of the big deciding factors in this game, because then the follow-up from Kevin was a collected company that only hit one Sylvan Advocate. I think that's the point where Robert really got ahead on tempo.
Well, here's an Eldrazi Displacer from Kevin with mana to use it. I think that maybe, ultimating Liliana isn't the way that Robert is going to win this game. So it might have been beneficial just to hold on to that grasp for a potential Displacer, since it was kind of telegraphed with the waste from Kevin. All right, so Grim Flayer is going to attack. We're going to get a double block. That's going to kill the Grim Flayer, but Liliana will be able to clean up the action. And if Kevin doesn't get any damage on it, then I may have spoke a little too soon here.
Yeah, I think the emblem's still going to be the way he wins. I mean, it may just be...
But here comes Ishkana.
A scoop from Kevin.
With a bunch of bodies.
Yeah, but even if Kevin could muster some sort of defense, the emblem would put it away.
All right, so the turn is going to go back to Kevin Jones, and let's see what he can muster here.
Very impressive draw from Robert Wright. I know you were saying that Robert worked with Todd Stevens on this deck.
Yeah, the two of them worked on it last week in Indianapolis, and then this week.
And Displacer certainly doesn't line up particularly well against Ishkana.
Does not. Well, it can get rid of the tokens.
Yeah, it's
I guess.
Takes a while, though. It's like pretty mana inefficient.
Let's see what Robert decides to do. Looks like he's just going to attack with everything.
Yeah, considering Robert's at 19,
here's a collected company.
There's so little chance that Kevin can muster a defense and offense.
If Robert had a land, I would have liked playing my land before I attacked. Looks like he's just going to get a couple of 4/5s.
It is good that those can play offense and defense, but there's going to be a lot of zombies hitting the board. Another thing that's nice about this is it can actually block Ishkana without Kevin dying.
I wonder if Robert also should have fired up one of those Quagmires and attacked.
Mm-hmm. Definitely a good thing worth considering. It would potentially push a lot more damage and force Kevin to block Ishkana rather than have the option of blocking a spider.
Those advocates are actually really good in the face of these zombies, but they will build up fairly quickly in a couple of turns.
Mm-hmm. And I do like blocking the Ishkana better than the spider. I think Kevin really wants to preserve a few extra points of life. If he has time, he can do quite a bit with his Eldrazi Displacer. But if he's at like 1 or 2 life, a lot of his blocks are forced.
All right, so he's going to get in 2 points of damage, drop Kevin down to 4, lose his Den Protector and a spider. Liliana is going to make an emblem. And let's see if Robert has anything else up his sleeve for the rest of this turn.
And if Robert... Okay.
He does have a land.
Yeah, so if he wasn't oh, he gets to activate.
He can activate now.
So Kevin's at 1.
Yeah, had he played his land pre-combat, that would have been a lethal attack.
Yeah. Well, either way, when you're this far ahead on resources, all roads lead to victory.
To the right place.
Yep.
Yeah, so we have this growing army of zombies is going to happen, plus just another Ishkana activation will end the game next turn. But let's see what Kevin can do. Looks like we're just going to play a Tireless Tracker. Got another land.
And if he can crack a clue for Reflector Mage, he does buy himself a turn. So does he draw it?
Crack his clue.
Or Jamoka's Command. That would also be good. Does he draw an answer for the Ishkana? He does not.
He does not. It's just a land. And Robert is going to take the first game here. And a great showing from Green Black Delirium over Bant Company. Was that how you thought it was going to happen?
Well, I thought that the Bant Company would be able to overwhelm Robert a little bit more in the mid game, but like I said earlier, Robert had 2 spells on turn 4 that were quite good, and Kevin's first collected company only hit 1 creature.
Yeah,
so
that's real big.
I think that was the defining factor. That meant that Robert stayed ahead on tempo, and Kevin wasn't really able to do anything to really catch up, so he's just behind.
Well, let's take a look at the player sideboard and see if we can figure out what they're going to be doing here. So let's look at Kevin Jones. He has 2 Tragic Arrogance, 2 Lambbolt Pacifist, 2 Declaration in Stone, 2 Negate, 2 Aerial Volley, 2 Ochitai's Command, an Archangel Avacyn, a Nissa Vastwood Seer, and a Summary Dismissal. How do we think Kevin's going to sideboard?
So I think that Kevin is likely to bring in Tragic Arrogance. The games can be pretty back and forth. Tragic Arrogance is a good way to deal with some of Robert's problematic permanents. Some of the other cards that I think that he'll bring in are potentially the Negates to fight against some of those removal spells. Ochitai's Command is his best answer to something like Ishkana. Archangel Avacyn can do a bit of work just protecting his creatures from removal spells like Ruinous Path, as well as being a good flying body to attack with. Since he is boarding in those more expensive spells, I like the Nissa. It's going to help him grind out his opponent a little bit more. And then Summary Dismissal, I know that's one of the new, I believe it's a blue card.
Yeah, it 4 or 2 blue. It exiles all spells and abilities that are on the stack.
Okay, yeah, so it's a big counterspell. I don't think that'll bring in that. I think Ochitai's Command is significantly better, and Kevin doesn't want to have too many counter spells, because if he ever falls behind on the board, the counter spells just don't do a lot there. Ochitai's Command kind of breaks that rule, because you can get a 2-drop back from the graveyard.
Yeah.
But those are the cards I think he'll bring in.
Yeah, I like the idea of Avacyn as a way to try and pressure Liliana.
Yep.
But we've seen time and time again from these green-black decks, like Liliana, it's just been very good.
Yep.
So let's take a look at Robert's sideboard. We have 3 Aerial Volley, 2 Languish, 2 Duress, 2 Transgress the Mind, 1 Den Protector, 1 Dark Petition, 1 Ishkana Graph Widow, 1 Kalida's Trader of Get, 1 Obnixilus Reignited, and 1 Infinite Obliteration. How do we think he's going to side?
So I think, like Kevin, he's going to be looking to go bigger and a little bit more controlling. So I would expect to see the Languishes, some number of Transgress the Mind can be good against Collected Company. But the other things that are going to pull a lot of weight are the Den Protector, the Ishkana, the Obnixilus, and maybe the Kalidas also.
I definitely can see that. So it looks like both players are going to keep their 7. Kevin Jones is going to be on the play. He's going to lead off with an Evolving Wilds and crack it on Robert's end step after he plays a Hissing Quagmire. We're going to get a basic island, and this smells like a Jace.
Yeah, turn 2 Jace is great. Robert does have some good answers for it, but turn 2 Jace is great.
The old deadweight. Sorry, Jace.
Yeah.
Little ball and chain.
You know, deadweight does a lot of work, because with Liliana, it's more likely that your deadweight is going to actually kill something.
Yeah.
Which is pretty important.
So also with Grasp of Darkness, I found when I was testing, there were multiple times where I would just like use Grasp alongside Liliana to kill something like a Dragon Lord Silumgar or a Linvala the Preserver.
Yep.
It's pretty nice.
So one thing that's a little interesting about this is a lot of times when I'm commentating 2 decks, I'll say this guy's the kind of the beatdown role, this guy's the control role. I think in this situation, both decks are actually trying to board into a more mid-range and controlling deck. And what's going to dictate who is the aggressor and who's the defender is going to be the actual texture of the game state. If Kevin has an active Jace or an active Nissa or an active Tireless Tracker, he's going to be more inclined to play the control role, because those cards generate a lot of value. Whereas if Robert is able to, get some Den Protectors and Lilianas going and make trades with Deathmist Raptors, he's going to be inclined to be the one who wants the game to go long and trades a lot. The one thing that's a little odd about that is a lot of Robert's cards are best when he's kind of being aggressive, like Deathmist Raptor and Grim Flayer, like want to be attacking to force trades, whereas a lot of Kevin's sources of card advantage are still good on defense, but he has cards like Reflector Mage that like really want him to be aggressive.
All right, so Robert's just going to attack, get some damage in. He has a Gnarlwood Dryad that Kevin's going to snag with a Spell Queller. He did have a Liliana in hand that he opted to not play because of Spell Queller. So let's see if he's able to free that Dryad later on or not.
And this is exactly what you want to do against a Spell Queller deck, is you want to line up what you want the Spell Queller to hit. Now, if I was Kevin, I would assume that Robert doesn't have a Grasp in Darkness, because Robert probably would have grasped the Spell Queller on his main phase rather than pass it back to Kevin. So that's certainly a piece of information that Kevin might be able to derive from the situation.
All right, so Kevin does not have a 4th land, although he does have a Reflector Mage to bounce the Gnarlwood Dryad back to Robert's hand. Robert picked up a copy of Kalida's Trader of Get, though. Let's see if he decides to just slam it here. One Reflector Mage is already down for Kevin. If he's able to untap with that Kalidas, he could do a lot of work here.
Yeah, what Robert would really like to have here, though, is a Languish. Languish would be great. Kill both of Kevin's creatures, get Robert's back.
All right, there's the Kalidas and a pass back to Kevin after playing his 4th land.
That said, Robert might be able to bait even more into this board by playing this Kalidas. And, you know, the sweepers are interesting in these kind of creature-heavy decks because you get to pick and choose when you're going to use them, and that ends up being an interesting decision point.
All right, well, Spell Queller is just going to attack. That's going to knock Robert down to 16. And Kevin's just going to pass the turn back, so he could
Looks like Kevin's missing his 4th land drop.
Now he missed his land drop again. An attack for 3 from the Kalidas is going to knock Kevin down to 16 and bring Robert back up to 19. Let's see what he does with his 5th turn.
You know, in these Bant Company decks, I'm such a fan of just playing a high land count, because all you want to do is hit your collected companies, and it's so unlikely that you'll actually run out of resources, especially when you have things like Lumbering Falls, Jace, Tireless Tracker. I think that one of the easiest ways for this Bant Company deck to lose is to just miss land drops.
Yeah. All right, so we have a Liliana from Robert. It's going to make that Queller be a 0/2. And then he has a Gnarlwood Dryad in a 5th land here. So this is one of the reasons why I really like Gnarlwood Dryad in this deck. Like, not only is it a good defensive creature, it has the potential to grow later on in the game, similar to Nimble Mongoose, but it just gets you to points where you do more things than your opponent faster.
Right. The tempo is a big deal. It's definitely one of the good things about this green-black deck is it's a lot of 1 and 2, 1, 2, and 3 mana spells. And when we were talking earlier about Spell Queller, I had mentioned that I think that's one of the ways to beat Spell Quellers, by just having a lot of cheap spells.
All right, well, Robert is going to attack with his Kalidas and Gnarlwood Dryad. It's going to knock Kevin down to 12 and bring Robert up to 22. Now, Kevin did find his 4th land, though, so he has a handful of collected companies that he's going to unleash here on Robert, which could turn out to be very good.
Yeah, we'll have to see how Robert decides to take the game from here, because he's got a lot of creatures. I think he'll probably just keep deploying threats, but he would like to fire off some removal spells. Ooh, this is a great trick. This is something I love doing.
Morphing the Raptor?
Yeah, morphing the Raptor when you have Den Protector in your deck.
Yeah, because this looks like a perfect Den Protector.
Yep.
Although, to be fair, I think that Kevin would try and Spell Queller a face-up Raptor here anyway.
Yeah, well, but it also matters for things like Dramoka's Command or Eldrazi Displacer or Reflector Mage. So.
Wow, well, this company is going to hit a Spell Queller and a Reflector Mage.
Very nice.
So it's going to Spell Queller the Deathmiss Raptor, Reflector Mage back to Kalidas.
Okay, and that is a monstrous tempo swing.
Yeah.
Kevin was able on that turn to deploy 2 threats and take away his opponent's 2 threats.
All for 4 mana.
Huge, huge swing.
Pretty good value, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, Liliana is just going to minus. It's going to get Robert another Gnarlwood Dryad, and that's what he's going to deploy. Really, he just wants to find his copy of Languish.
And this means that Kevin can kill the Liliana and also push some damage.
All right, so Kevin has found a 5th land. It's going to be Wastes.
So I don't believe the Gnarl Root Dryads are 3/3s yet, but if Kevin isn't attacking with a Reflector Mage, then maybe they are. Looks like they're not yet.
No, looks like there's a land creature in Robert's graveyard. But they do already have that touch.
Right,
lately.
but if Kevin waits and lets them grow, then they're just going to straight up beat the Reflector Mages in combat. and that's going to be a little bit of a problem.
All right, well, Liliana is going to go down on the attack, and an Eldrazi Displacer is going to hit the battlefield for Kevin.
Oh, and this is really nice. So this is going to give Delirium for Robert, meaning that he can land an Ishkana and get all the tokens. So this is going to be a pretty big move,
and it's going to make his
for Robert to, stabilize the board.
It'll make his Dryads a 3/3s as well.
Yep.
So the 2 3/3s are going to come in. I like this attack. Get aggressive. We got a game to end.
And this is just a chump block. You know.
It is.
Kevin Jones' 3-mana creature gets trumped by Robert's 1-mana creature. It's a pretty big deal.
All right, so Kevin's going to take 3, go down to 9. Reflector Mage is going to die. Here's a land, and now we have Ishkana. It's going to bring about some spiders.
Kevin does have the option to start doing some nice shenanigans with the Reflector Mage and Displacer. He can block one of the Gnarl Root Dryads in combat with the Reflector Mage, and then blink it to bounce the other, stuff like that. But the Ishkana is a pretty big body. It's going to be tough to deal with.
Not only that, but Robert does have 6 lands and 1 in his hand, so he is going to be able to start, dealing damage with that Ishkana's activation. So it looks like Kevin is going to kill a spider and grow his Reflector Mage. No, he's just going to make the Displacer a 4/4.
I think the main hope there is that if you can get another +1/+1 counter on the Reflector Mage, it won't die to Grasp in Darkness or Languish. It's probably the most important creature that he has access to right now.
The Displacer, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The Spell Quellers are pretty important too. If they die, Kevin's likely to lose, but... Oh, the other thing that's really nice too is with the +1/+1 counter on the Displacer, it can block the Ishkana.
It can. That is real important.
So Kevin's got himself in kind of a nice spot defensively also, and he might be able to start making some ground.
These Gnarl Root Dryads being 3/3s is a pretty big game, though.
Yeah.
They're just going to keep attacking.
Yeah, Kevin will be able to hold them off, but at the expense of his mana.
Yeah, he'll be able to put the Reflector Mage on one and then blink it with the Displacer to bounce the other.
Yep.
Let's see what he does here. He does have another copy of Collected Company in hand.
Notably, if he is able to start activating a Duskwatch Recruiter, finding something like a Liliana would be really nice, or just a Nissa to make it so that he can do a little bit more in this board stall.
Yeah, Nissa seems like it would be great as a way to just keep getting lands.
Yeah. Well, also just in this situation where neither of them can really make any headway against each other, it's pretty important to just have something that can get some value in a board stall, whether it's a Planeswalker or a creature with activated abilities.
All right, so it looks like Kevin is just going to put the team on that Ishkana and then put a Reflector Mage on one Gnarl Root Dryad.
He knows that the Ishkana can kill him, so it's pretty important to get rid of it.
All right, so Displacer is going to hit Reflector Mage.
And what's nice about this is the ground creatures that Robert can get back from the Spell Queller aren't as relevant as they used to be.
So Robert stacked it so that the Gnarl Root Dryad is the one that would come back from the Spell Queller, but you still have to play the spell, and because Dryad had been hit by Reflector Mage, he's not able to play it.
Oh wow, so it's just back in his hand?
No, it's just exiled
It's
forever.
just exiled forever.
So,
wow, that's sick. I didn't know that rules interaction.
Neither did I. So until just now. So had he stacked it so that he could get back to Deathmiss Raptor, he would have an additional 3/3 Death Touch
What
right
a
now.
move. Kevin Jones, ladies and gentlemen, teaching us how to play.
Man.
I love it.
That's
great.
That's pretty neat.
That is pretty neat.
It's Trixie Bant Company deck.
Mm-hmm. And now this Spell Queller can actually start attacking. Potentially. Unfortunately, that face-down creature means that Robert has a good chance of getting back this Ishkana, and Kevin's going to have to slog through it again, but getting Jace is perfect. This is exactly what Kevin needs.
Yeah, it'll allow him to use that Dramoka's command again to kill the Ishkana if and when it comes back.
Yeah.
It's pretty important.
And, you know, it can just start ticking up and, you know, flashing back collected companies. Essentially just do a lot of work.
All right, Spell Queller is just going to attack for 2. That's going to knock Robert down to 18. Man, that Spell Queller Reflector Mage interaction
that was a cool trick.
Nice.
So one thing that's a little interesting about this is we actually haven't seen a single removal spell out of Robert's deck in this whole game. A little unlucky.
All right, well, here is a Transgress the Mind. It's going to allow him to see Kevin's hand and going to force the collected company to come now.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to miss, though. So it's certainly not in Robert's favor. Kevin is most certainly sweating a Languish at this point, but I think he's just going to be dead to Languish no matter what at any point.
Well, here's another Reflector Mage and a Tireless Tracker. That's going
that's
to bounce the Gnarl Root Dryad.
So Kevin's got a lot of his sources of card advantage online. If Kevin can untap here and not be in too much trouble, he's going to be in great position. What he would really like to draw now is something like a Negate, just so that he can counter a Languish. But he's going to start leveraging all his resources quite soon because they're going to snowball.
All right, well, he's drawn another collected company.
And this gives him an opportunity to rebuild if there is a sweeper.
And his Jace loot is going to get him a land, so he can get rid of the Duskwatch Recruiter here. And now he has land number 6, so it will turn on any Sylvan Advocates that he happens to find. But now he can company from his hand and flash back Dramoka's command from his graveyard if he needs to.
Yeah, what's also nice about this too, I mean, well, this just highlights why I like playing a high land count in the Bant Company deck, especially when you're playing a controlling build like this. So many of your creatures are mana sinks, and so long as you have the land drops, you won't fall behind, and your creatures will make it so that you never flood out. And flipping this Jace to flashback Dramoka's command is not coming a moment too soon, because if Robert had the opportunity to untap, he could activate that Ishkana and actually cause Kevin to lose 6 life. It's a pretty big deal.
Well, it looks like he's just going to cash in his clue and find a copy of Dramoka's command. So everything is just coming up exactly how he needs it. So he's going to plus the Jace on the Den Protector.
And I think I would actually prefer to flash back the Dramoka's command. I think keeping a Dramoka's command in hand is quite valuable because you can fire it off on Robert's turn. If Robert had something like a, Kalidas into removal spell, and Kevin knows that Robert has the removal spell, that could be a problematic scenario.
Now, Robert's still at 18 with a whole bunch of spiders on the battlefield, so Kevin does still have to finish this game.
Yeah. If Robert doesn't have a way of either killing Kevin or sweeping the board, there's not much that Robert can draw that's going to matter. Probably one of his best draws would be just a Liliana to get back the Ishkana.
All right, so it looks like he's going to put all of his spiders on the Displacer.
And I'm a little surprised that Kevin is attacking with the Displacer.
Yeah, I guess he can use Reflector Mage to get rid of one of them. And
he's only going to kill 2 of them, though. They're 1/2s.
In the combat, so.
Yeah. Seems like kind of a bad trade, but I guess he just wants to close this game out sooner than later. He feels like he has enough mana sinks
Ooh, and there's another Den Protector to get back that Ishkana again.
Yeah, he's not going to be able to cast it until next turn, though.
He is going to be able to replay the Gnarlwood Dryad here now, though.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, here is the Den Protector. Oh, and 2 Dryads.
Very nice turn for Robert.
So the ground is shore up here.
And Gnarlroot Dryad seems to be one of the better cards against this Bant Company deck, because once it has Delirium, it can beat a lot of the Bant Company creatures inside of combat. And if it gets Reflector Maged, it is just so easy to just play again at some point down the line. So definitely a card that's well positioned against this Bant Company deck.
All right, well, Kevin was able to find another copy of Eldrazi Displacer on Robert's end step. So this battlefield is getting a little confusing, so let's wrap it up for those of you just joining us. Robert has 3 1/2 Spider tokens, 2 Gnarlroot Dryads that are 3/3s with Death Touch, a face-down Den Protector, and a face-up Den Protector with a +1/+1 counter on it. Kevin has 2 Reflector Mages, a Tireless Tracker with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, a Spell Queller that has a Deathmist Raptor exiled underneath it. He has an Eldrazi Displacer, a Duskwatch Recruiter, and a Jace Telepath Unbound on 6 counters.
Yeah, and Kevin played Evolving Wilds, which is a sweet card to have with Tireless Tracker, because that Evolving Wilds makes 2 clues, which is quite nice.
It does. On top of having just another Collected Company in his hand. So on his end step, Robert is able to unmorph the Den Protector, get back in Ishkana.
And this Tireless Tracker is going to be huge. It's going to be able to +1/+1 fight the Ishkana whenever it hits play.
Maybe this is a game where Kevin just tries to ultimate that Jace.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Ultimating Jace against a Delirium deck seems a little dicey.
Like, he already has Delirium.
Yeah, well, but it's more for like cards like Deathmist Raptor.
Yeah.
Can give him like a lot of options with Den Protector. He's already played 2 of his Den Protectors, so maybe he's fine with it. But it does seem hard for Kevin to mount an offense while also playing enough defense. So
yeah,
it might be. What's the ultimate on Jace? 9?
I believe so.
And is he at 8 now? No, he's at 7. So in 3 turns, he could potentially ultimate it. It certainly makes his plays easier, but he's going to have to minus the Jace to kill this Ishkana.
Yeah, so there is an Ishkana.
Unless Kevin's able to draw another removal spell.
1 Gnarlroot Dryad is going to attack Jace. I think we're going to see a Collected Company here from Kevin.
Yep. And these Gnarlroot Dryads are a problem. If Kevin doesn't hit a Reflector Mage, he might need to like double block the Gnarlroot Dryad, losing both of his creatures. Oh, Nissa. And a 3/3 body. This is perfect for Kevin.
We've got a Lambholt Pacifist and a Nissa.
Jeez.
Nissa's going to let him go get a Forest.
And this will mean that Kevin is well insulated against a Languish, because he's going to be able to play a land and flip that Nissa. Tireless Tracker is going to be out of range. So Kevin definitely seems like he's in the driver's seat. And you see why Bant Company is so hard to beat. There's so many different flavors of it, and this particular version that Kevin is playing has a lot of card advantage. If you try to play the control role and try to deplete the Bant Company player of resources, they're going to be able to grind you out with all of this stuff, and it's hard to rush them down when they have such big tempo swings in the form of Collected Company and a Reflector Mage.
All right. Well, Dramoka's command is going to put a counter on the Eldrazi Displacer and have Tireless Tracker fight off Ishkana. Here's a land. It's going to get another clue for Kevin.
And for all its value, unfortunately, the Ishkana is just a 3/5, so it's not the best in head-to-head fights.
The land is going to transform Nissa. It's going to put another land on the battlefield. It's going to get another clue for Tireless Tracker. This is going to get real ugly for Robert Wright real fast.
Yeah, we can see Kevin acting like a some sort of constrictor and starting to tighten his grip on the game. Now he has a spell queller in hand, so even if Robert does draw an effective removal spell, Kevin can potentially counter it if he chooses, potentially just blink the target with his Eldrazi Displacer. If Robert casts something that Kevin's worried about, he could potentially just blink his spell queller to counter it and give Robert the Deathmist Raptor back, because the Deathmist Raptor is not actually going to do that much on the board.
All right, well, Gnarl Root Dryad is going to come in towards Nissa, it seems. Do have to note that there are only 10 minutes left in this match, so even if Kevin does happen to win this game, he's going to have to finish a game 3 very quickly on the draw.
Yeah. That will be tough.
All right. Looks like we had a...
And this is another way to get back Ishkana.
Ooh, and there's Languish. Does Robert have a land to also play the Ishkana? Looks like he does not. All right, so looks like Displacer is going to take care of one of the spider tokens, but a murder is going to kill the Displacer.
Well done. Well done on Robert. Saved that for the perfect moment. Kevin still has a lot going on, but without that Displacer, things are most certainly a little worse.
Yeah, it definitely gives Robert a chance to potentially grind into enough spider tokens to untap with Ishkana and win the game.
Yeah, it's going to be a little dicey, though, because the Tireless Tracker and the Nissa are drawing extra cards. Jace can still, minus to flash back a Jamoka's command. I think that the likely way for Kevin to win this game is to ultimate his Nissa. And it's going to be pretty hard for Robert to actually attack it at this stage.
All right, Jace is just going to plus on a Den Protector. Have a Yevamaya Coast. All right. This Tireless Tracker is huge.
Yeah. And Robert doesn't have the Death Touch creatures that he used to. And because Kevin is drawing extra cards, he's fine just trading. So
is he going to put everything on it?
In these situations, I do like just blocking it with more than enough, because you never know if your opponent's going to blow you out with like double Jamoka's command or something like that, and you can just make sure that doesn't happen. Looks like he's just going to chump, though.
Yeah, it's like he's going to chump with the Den Protector that was targeted by Jace. Kevin's going to cash in a Clue, going to grow his Tireless Tracker. Going to cash in another Clue, maybe. Got a lot of resources here. He's gone through 2 Displacers. There's still one more left in his deck.
Yeah, and if Kevin was looking for spells like Ojutai's command and Jamoka's command, I would like I like cracking the Clues. But if he's just looking for more threats, I like activating the Duskwatch Recruiter a bit more.
All right. So it looks like he's just going to play the Sylvan Advocate. Robert has an Ishkana. And he has another Den Protector in hand, and he also picked up a copy of Grasp of Darkness, so he can actually kill a 5 toughness creature right now if he wants to.
Yeah, and this could be the deciding factor. We'll have to see what Kevin draws this turn, because if Kevin can't kill the Ishkana, Kevin's just going to be dead.
What might be interesting here is that Grasp might save this Ishkana by shrinking the creature trying to fight it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So Kevin's going to activate Duskwatch Recruiter. It's going to miss. It's going to activate again and find that Eldrazi Displacer.
And this is great for Kevin, because this means what I would expect him to do is just minus the Jace to get Jamoka's command and kill that Ishkana. And then if Robert has the Grasp in Darkness to, foil that plan, Kevin can at least play the Displacer and flicker a Reflector Mage to bounce Ishkana.
And so here's the Jamoka's command. going to put a counter and have the Tireless Tracker fight the Ishkana.
So, and I believe the Liliana targeted the tracker.
Yeah.
So, despite the clues, I'm pretty sure this still works. So, the Tireless Tracker, I believe, is a...
Yeah, so it's going to have -6 total.
Yeah.
And so it's 8. And even with the 1 clue going up to 9, still is only...
Don't think that should have happened, but maybe the Liliana must have targeted something else.
Yeah, it might not have targeted the tracker. It seems strange for Robert to just use his grasp and walk into the clue being sacrificed.
I agree with that.
Maybe we can get some clarification. Got another Sylvan Advocate.
You can really see this Band Company deck, though, just getting out of control. Looks like now maybe they're starting to remember how it's supposed to go. But
yeah, because without the Liliana, it doesn't work.
Yeah, this game certainly highlights, though, how robust the Band Company deck can be in the late game, despite being typically categorized as like a more aggressive deck. You know, even though it has Reflector Mage, it has a lot that it can do in these late game scenarios. And a lot of it is because, you know, it's playing these aggressive creatures, but a lot of them have activated abilities that are good in board stalls, can generate more value in a long game. It's not really playing any vanilla creatures. The most vanilla creature it's playing is just Sylvan Advocate, which grows as the game goes on and has some powerful interactions with the creature lands like Lumbering Falls.
Yeah.
So that's like one of the reasons it's so hard to target the Bant Company decks, is because, you know, if you try to be aggressive against them, they can just have Reflector Mage and Collected Company and just be able to keep tempo with you. And if you try to play a long game with them, you know, they have all of these good sources of card advantage.
Yeah, there's just so many angles of attack, and then you have situations like we saw earlier in this game where you're able to collect a company with a creature on the stack, get a Spell Queller to counter it, a Reflector Mage to bounce another permanent, and it's just like, what happened? I felt like I was so far ahead, adding more to my board, and now I'm just miles behind, and that's just simply casting a 4-mana instant.
Yeah, and that also highlights just how complex a lot of the interactions are, because all the creatures have activated abilities, because a lot of them have come to play effects, because you have things persist more than one turn, like the Reflector Mage bounces a creature. You can't just replay it immediately. You have to keep track of that. You know, there's Lumbering Falls hiding in the mana base. You know, there's just a lot going on, and there's a lot to think about. You know, it's not some days past where it was just vanilla creatures attacking into other vanilla creatures, and whoever had the biggest creature had an advantage. Here you have certain cards that are better in smaller windows of time as opposed to longer windows of time. So it really means that you have to have a lot of practice against the Bant Company deck if you want to be able to navigate the match well.
Also, so it looks like we've got a judge ruling that's happening down at the table, so we're going to chat a little bit. But can we take a second and just appreciate how awesome that interaction was?
Yeah, it was really
between
cool.
Spell Queller and Reflector Mage with the Eldrazi Displacer. So for those of you who weren't watching at the time or didn't quite catch it, because I kind of blazed through it real fast, Robert ended up trading off in combat, killing a Spell Queller that had a Gnarlroot Dryad under it. But during combat, a Reflector Mage was bounced, was flickered with an Eldrazi Displacer, returned a Gnarlroot Dryad to Robert's hand, which made it so he couldn't play that card any longer until his next turn. Spell Queller doesn't just automatically put it into play. You actually have to physically, have to
it's getting cast.
Choose it to cast the card, and it's prevented by Reflector Mage. That is not something that I had ever thought of before, but is awesome.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are kind of bummed out that Bant Company is still such a dominant deck despite having a new set, and you know, people are like, oh, Bant Company, it's, you know, I'm so bored of it or whatever. But it really is just great Magic to watch. You get to see the deck play a lot of different roles. It's you know, always exciting for me to see when it transitions from a beatdown deck to a card advantage deck, and just how all the complicated interactions and decisions go. For me, that's my favorite kind of Magic. It's just seeing, relatively fair fights where there's just a lot of combat math that you have to do, a lot of options, a lot of decisions to be made, and you do see a lot of reflector mages and collected companies winning games, but generally speaking, the Bant Company matches, they don't all play out in the same way. Sometimes they end up leaning a lot more on Nissa. Sometimes it's Displacer. Sometimes they're playing more aggressive cards like Thalia or Renegade Crisis.
Displacer has been looking real impressive this game so far.
Yeah, I like Eldrazi Displacer a lot. I think that it's a good card when you want to have the option to be aggressive or defensive. When you're looking at something like Bounding Crisis, with that, I look at that as a purely aggressive 3-drop. Same with Thalia. It's just aggression. They're both great cards, but they're only aggressive. Whereas Eldrazi Displacer, he's a half a step slower than those cards, but he can give you a really big boost in tempo because you can just lock down a couple creatures, but he can also be a big burst of tempo when you're flickering your reflector mages and spell quellers. It can also just be outright card advantage if you're flickering Gideon tokens, and you can kill your opponent's Gideon, flicker your opponent's Hangerback Walker, get that out of the way. If you're up against green-white tokens and you're trying to play, Archangel Avacyn and then zero a Hangerback Walker before the Avacyn flips, you can flicker it so that it doesn't. There's a lot of play with Eldrazi Displacer, so I'm a big fan of it in this deck.
And I really like how a card like Ishkana is lining up against it. So we saw, towards the end of last Standard season, Displacer was becoming a little more commonplace, and a lot of decks moved towards Linvala as a card that's just very good against Eldrazi Displacer.
Yeah.
Ishkana is playing that role perfectly, and in this instance, we've seen Robert cast that Ishkana 4 times now in this game.
Yep.
Through Den Protector and Liliana -2s, and I say what, Bant Company is a great deck, but I've been real impressed with this Delirium deck the 2 times now we've had it on camera.
Yeah, it does seem like a very good deck. It does seem like it has a lot of game against the Bant Company deck. It almost seems like it's trying to play kind of like a role that we see Delver play in Legacy, where it's kind of the aggressor, but it's also kind of trying to disrupt his opponent's game plan at the same time. The green-black deck, it seems like it's not really favored in a long game because it doesn't have as many sources of card advantage. But with the Grim Flayer and Gnarl Root Dryad, it's able to get in a little bit underneath the Bant Company deck, which is a hard thing to do when you're up against Reflector Mage and Collected Company. But it seems like this green-black deck, it is kind of able to sneak under a little bit and just make some trades while it's pushing damage. And that's a recipe we've seen the White Humans deck do successfully, where it just gets in underneath the Collected Company decks. So it'll be interesting to see how well Robert Wright and Todd Stevens do with this deck.
Well, even still, it doesn't look like there's a lot of card advantage on the surface, but Den Protector.
Yeah, Den Protector, Deathmist Raptor, Liliana is a package.
Ishkana is a lot of value. You also have this 1 Traverse that you can use to go find things.
Yeah. It's got creature lands.
Yeah, it's got creature lands. It's surprising me.
Yeah, I like
I would not be surprised if I see one of the big pro teams pick it up and tweak it for the Pro Tour next weekend.
Oh yeah, I could definitely see that. And similar to the Collected Company deck, you could make this green-black deck be more aggressive or more controlling if you wanted. A lot of these cards play multiple roles well, like Deathmist Raptor, for example. That's a card that it hasn't been really frequent, but we have seen that card play a pivotal role in control decks. We saw in seasons past, not literally the card seasons past, but in previous seasons, we've seen Deathmist Raptor get played in Abzan Megamorph decks, where that was one of the ways that they locked up the ground and generated value, was by recurring Deathmist Raptor with Den Protector. But it looks like we're finally back in this game. Nice.
Yeah, so let's take a look and see what has happened with the judge ruling. So it looks like we still have an Ishkana not on the board.
Yeah.
So
I'm not a judge, but I would guess that
there were just enough things that happened that they weren't able to back up. That's my guess.
Yeah. Well, either way, I don't think it would have been a deciding factor in the game because Kevin did have access to another Eldrazi Displacer, a lot of mana, and a Reflector Mage. So I think what we're likely to see here is Kevin just make some trades and hope that he can buy enough time to ultimate his Nissa.
Yeah, well, Robert was able to trade off 2 spiders for that Sylvan Advocate that's attacking. He can just -2 his Liliana here and get back that Ishkana.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem half bad.
Well, if he's got a Den Protector, he can plus his Liliana first, which would be quite nice.
So he's just going to Den Protector, get back, Grasp, use the Grasp to take care of that Displacer. That seems like a good use of his resources since it's the 3rd and final Displacer for Kevin Jones.
Yeah, and now Robert gets to
plus the Liliana on the Queller.
And he's going to be able to minus the Liliana next turn and still have it around. So very nice. Kevin needs to find a
Declaration.
Oh, wow. So that's actually a huge game. This means that he'll have enough attackers to probably kill the Liliana.
Wow.
Huge turn of events. Wow, the swings are real.
That's quite the draw for Kevin Jones. Declaration in Stone is going to take care of all 6 of those spiders.
Brutal. Jeez.
I believe both of those Den Protectors should have counters on them.
And Kevin can just kill the Nissa, and Kevin is in phenomenal shape. There's very little that can go wrong from this position.
Wow. What a draw.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's what happens when you're drawing 2 extra cards a turn, is you're just going to draw some hot action.
Yeah. Well, not only 2 extra cards a turn, like it's been more than that averaged out because of that, because of the Tireless Tracker giving clues.
Yeah, and the Duskwatch Recruiter activations, you know, it's just everything.
All right, well, the 3/2 Den Protector is going to trade off with the Duskwatch Recruiter. Liliana is going to die. That's going to stop any Ishkana shenanigans from happening.
And now even if Robert just finds another Ishkana, he's not, like, it's not really going to do that much. And the multiple Planeswalkers plus Sylvan Advocates means that Kevin's safe against Languish. You know, he's still got the Lumbering Falls. He's got another Duskwatch Recruiter to just draw more cards. We really see Kevin just leaning on his opponent, and Robert is just, you know, he's got cards in hand, but they just don't do enough.
And a Spell Queller in hand even.
Yeah.
It is important to note, though, that Kevin looks like he's the favorite to win this game, but they still only have 5 minutes to finish the match.
Yeah, well, they probably have a little bit of a time extension with the judge call. So if Kevin can rush to victory, you know, we might be able to see one player win with a fast start.
All right, so there's the Kalidas. Kevin is going to Ojutai's command the Kalidas. Get back another Sylvan Advocate.
Yeah, and we're just going to the next one.
All right, and Robert's going to scoop it up as they move on to Game 3. They're going to have about 5 minutes remaining. I have to imagine that they're probably going to shuffle up fairly quickly. Do we think that there's going to be any changes to the sideboards?
I think that neither of them will make any changes, and even if they thought about it, they wouldn't because there's no time.
Fair enough. Well, while the players finish up shuffling here very quickly, I just want to take a brief second to chat about the Kaladesh pre-release that's coming up.
Whoa, it's a tiger.
Very soon. Yeah, so this is...
Oh, I got to get me one of these.
So this is Bengali Rye.
That's awesome.
Is the name of our tiger. And
she's got a fish.
She is floating a fish in her hand. So the Kaladesh pre-release September 24th and 25th. You can register today online for the pre-release there at Star City Games. But if you're wanting to get this limited edition playmat in your local stores, please, please, please let your store know to get a hold of us. Go to starcitygames.com/pre-release for information, or they can email isp@starcitygames.com to get that set up there in your store, because once the pre-release is done, once we sell out of the extra ones that they put on the website afterwards, no more. So Bengali Ra, the Kaladesh pre-release creature collection parody playmat. Make sure you let your local game store know that you want it there in your store, so they can contact StarCityGames.com.
I'm a big fan of that one. I like tigers.
Yeah?
I got a soft spot, yep.
Soft spot for the tiger?
Yeah, I went to RIT. Our school mascot was a tiger, but I don't know. I feel like it's an ongoing theme in my life.
All right, so our players are shuffled up and ready for Game 3. Robert Wright's going to be on the play. Let's see if we can crown a champion or if it will end up in a draw. Robert's going to keep his hand. Start off with a swamp. Let's see what Kevin Jones has.
The sequencing with this Bant deck, especially with the early land drops, is quite complicated. So I'm not surprised to see Kevin take a moment there to try to plan it perfectly.
All right. This looks like he has a Prairie Stream. Robert's going to have a Forest and a Grimflayer. Here we have a Jace from Kevin.
And Grimflayer is definitely the card that Robert wants if he's looking to have a fast, aggressive start.
All right, so Liliana is going to plus. Robert is going to drop down to 19 to play the Liliana. Grimflayer is going to connect. He gets to filter 3 cards. Let's see. Looks like he's just going to put a creature and a Planeswalker in his graveyard to start powering up that Delirium. And this is where the Bant Company deck, we've seen so many times where they will start a Game 3 with very little time, and if they don't have a hyper-aggressive draw, they're always able to just stay alive because of how powerful Reflector Mage is.
Yeah, it's really hard to rush down a Bant Company deck. One thing that I would really like to see this weekend is a deck that goes turn 2 Jace, turn 3 Liliana. That's
nice.
something that I would like to do. I think those 2 creatures work extremely well in tandem.
All right, so we've got a Grasp in Darkness is going to, or Transgress the Mind is going to take a look at Kevin's hand. Collected Company is going to bite the bin. Tireless Tracker, Canopy Vista, Duskwatch Recruiter, Spell Queller is what's left behind. Let's see what Robert does. Liliana is going to plus on the
no other play. So Robert was able to 1-for-1 one of the cards out of Kevin's hand, but he was not able to deploy anything to the board.
All right, well, Kevin is just going to utilize his Jace on his turn. The Reflector Mage is 0 power, so it's not going to be able to pressure the Liliana at all.
Oh, wow. And did Kevin draw another Collected Company, or is he just holding? He might just be holding up the Spell Queller.
All right, got a plus on Liliana and pass the turn back. He did draw another Collected Company.
Brutal.
So we're going to look at the top 6.
And it looks like Robert has a Grasp in Darkness in his hand, so he might be able to find a situation where he can play something into a Spell Queller and then just grasp it away, but it looks like he wants to fire it off now. Can't really blame him.
Yeah, so Kevin's going to find a Displacer and a Duskwatch Recruiter. Robert's going to grasp the Displacer.
And Jace is going to be able to flip this turn, which is a pretty big deal. Kevin could potentially flip Jace, flashback Collected Company, and have a huge board state. He would have to be worried about something like Languish, but if he wants to win, he may just run that risk.
All right, so he's going to activate Jace, discard a Lambholt Pacifist. Jace will transform into Jace Telepath Unbound. Let's see what he decides to do here.
I personally really like just flashing back a Collected Company. It's scary to do in the face of Languish, but...
All right, Duskwatch Recruiter is going to attack Liliana down to 4.
I think it's too important to just develop a big board.
Here's the Collected Company.
And it's going to be close, but, I believe they have a little bit of extra... Ooh, that was a bad Collected Company.
So we have only a Reflector Mage, a Lumbering Falls. Looks like
oh, wow, so...
it was adjusted for turns.
Yeah.
So this is turn 1. Robert's going to plus on one of the Reflector Mages.
Kevin has Deck and Stone.
Just play a couple of Grimflayers. So it looks like the players did have an 8-minute extension that has been used. This is turn 2. This Declaration Stone is going to be filthy.
Yeah, I have to imagine that at this point, Kevin's probably just going to attack Robert's life total rather than the Liliana, although actually that might not be true.
All right, get a couple clues.
Yeah, and with Robert missing land drops, having cards in hand, and the time frame of this game, it's extremely unlikely that Robert will ever have time to make use of those clues.
All right, so it looks like he's just going to send 4 up top to Robert.
Yeah. He can't kill the Liliana this turn anyway, and he just doesn't have much time to slog through the Liliana and then slog through Robert.
All right, just going to pass the turn back to Robert. Kevin is only going to get 1 more turn in this match. Liliana's going to plus on our Reflector Mage and pass back.
And with a Spell Queller, Kevin could potentially attack for 11.
All right, so Duskwatch Recruiter is going to be activated on Robert's end step. In response, he is going to use a Murder on that Recruiter. Kevin will find a Lambholt Pacifist. Nope, another Duskwatch Recruiter.
Yeah, unfortunately, it looks like this game would probably end up in a draw, but it seems like it is probably good for Kevin. He's got the active Planeswalker. He can attack his opponent's Planeswalker, and I think the late game favors Kevin.
It's interesting is that Jace is just a 1-of in Kevin's deck, and he had it on turn 2 this game.
Well,
it's very perfect.
Yeah, it is a great 1-of though. You never have to worry about hitting multiples off your Duskwatch Recruiters, Jaces, or Collected Companies, and you do want to have your deck be mostly aggressive and just kind of be sprinkled with these card advantage engines. So if you play too many Jaces, his deck wouldn't be as aggressive, but having 1 means that he's usually going to have access to 1 in a long game when he wants to.
All right, well, Robert's going to take his 5th turn. After cracking the clue on Kevin's end step, he's going to play a creature face down. It's a Spell Queller. It's going to snag the Deathmist Raptor. Robert has a Grasp to unleash his Spell Queller.
And I really like Robert's decision making there. He could have played the Deathmist Raptor face up, and if that was the case, Kevin might not have Spell Quellered it, but trying to get a Dem Protector is a really juicy target. So it looks like that this is probably going to end up in a draw. We'll see, but all in all, I think that was pretty revealing for the matchup. I think the green-black Delirium deck has a little bit of an advantage in the early game, but it's really hard to keep that advantage when your opponent's drawing Collected Companies and Reflector Mages, and it seems like Band Company has the better end game.